Well, hello and welcome back to Outsiders and our weekly look at the latest news out of Washington you won't get if you're watching those other stations. I'm James Morrow here as always with Rowan Dean and Rita Panahi, and once again the news this week is impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. Only what you know about impeachment depends on who you listen to. And the thing is, if you're relying on the likes of the ABC and the Nine Press, well, then you're getting stuff like this from the Sydney Morning Herald. Trump's tweeting turns a bad day into a disaster. This is, my friends, about as reliable as an old Pravda report on the record beetroot harvest outside Minsk. But for those who've actually spent some time watching the hearings, another story is emerging. And guess what? Surprise! The Ukraine investigation is turning into yet another circular firing squad of Democrats because the deeper they dig into what may have happened between America and Kiev, the worse things look for the Biden family. Because remember, the whole question of this Ukraine scandal really hinges on whether or not Joe Biden's son Hunter was up to something dodgy when he was on the payroll of a Ukrainian oil and gas firm at a reported U.S. $50,000 per month at the least, despite having no experience in either oil and gas or Ukraine. Here's the current U.S. ambassador to Ukraine being asked if he knows any reason why Hunter Biden should have been pulling down that sort of coin.
If he possesses any other element other than the fact that he is the son of, at the time, the sitting vice president?
I do not.
Okay. Ambassador Taylor, do you know whether Hunter Biden offers anything other than the fact that his dad's the former vice president?
I don't.
Or at the time was the vice president?
I have no knowledge of Hunter Biden.
But you would agree it raises questions, right? He was getting paid, I think, $50,000 a month to sit on the board.
Note the awkward silence. And here's Representative Jim Jordan demolishing Ambassador Taylor's claims that there was a quid pro quo for American aid in return for an investigation of the Bidens, and getting him to admit that his knowledge of the phone call was actually secondhand.
You just told me this is where you got your clear understanding. Which, I mean, even though you had 3 opportunities with President Zelensky for him to tell you, you know what? We're going to do these investigations to get the aid. Didn't tell you 3 different times. Never makes an announcement, never tweets about it, never does a CNN interview. Ambassador, you weren't on the call, were you? The president, you didn't listen on President Trump's call and President Zelensky's call?
I did not.
You've never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney?
I never did.
You never met the president?
That's correct.
You had 3 meetings again with Zelensky and it didn't come up.
And 2 of those they had never heard about as far as I know.
And
there was no reason for it.
President Zelensky never made an announcement. This is what I can't believe, and you're their star witness.
Things got even more heated when New York Representative Elise Stefanik demolished the former ambassador to the Ukraine, noting that when she was appointed by the Obama White House, even then it was known that Hunter Biden might have a bit of a problem. Have a listen to this.
And this was in the form of practice questions and answers. This was your deposition. And you testified that in this particular practice Q&A with the Obama State Department, it wasn't just generally about Burisma and corruption, it was specifically about Hunter Biden and Burisma. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the exact quote from your testimony, Ambassador, is, quote, "The way the question was phrased in this model Q&A was, what can you tell us about Hunter Biden's, being named to the board of Burisma?" So for the millions of Americans watching, President Obama's own State Department was so concerned about potential conflicts of interest from Hunter Biden's role at Burisma that they raised it themselves while prepping this wonderful ambassador nominee before her confirmation. And yet our Democratic colleagues and the chairman of this committee cry foul when we dare ask that same question that the Obama State Department was so concerned about. But we will continue asking it. And lastly, in my 20 seconds left, I just want to get it on record. In terms of defensive lethal aid, which you were an advocate for, that was not provided by President Obama. It was provided by President Trump.
That's correct.
I yield back 5 seconds.
Indeed, things got so bad for the Democrats that their new message is that hearsay, yes, hearsay is actually better than direct evidence. Check this out.
Hearsay can be much better evidence than direct, as we have learned in painful instances, and it's certainly valid in this instance.
Well, gentlemen, yield because none of those exceptions would apply to this testimony.
It's a farce, so much so that the best the American NBC network could find out of the week was a drag queen showing up to add some levity to the proceedings. Look, at least he wasn't off doing story time with the local library, but honestly, what is it with the left and drag queens? Anyway, I digress. We all know that the real crime Trump committed here was beating Hillary Clinton, and for that the Democrats want to stop him by any means necessary. No less than that leading intellectual light of the Democratic Party, AOC herself, admitted as much this week, telling the press that impeachment was about trying to prevent a, quote, disastrous outcome in 2020, i.e. beating Trump beating whatever senile socialist they managed to stand against him next November. Look, whatever the merits of getting involved in Ukrainian politics or in its fight with Russia, the fact is that it was Trump who gave lethal defensive aid to Ukraine, not Obama. And it was Joe Biden, who we all remember in that famous speech, once held $1 billion in loan guarantees hostage until they fired a prosecutor the Obama administration didn't like. Honestly, the only possible rationale I can see for Democrats, particularly the progressive, or as one viewer keeps reminding me to say, regressive wing of the Democrat Party pushing so hard on this door, is that they want to damage not just Trump, but the relatively moderate Biden, and in doing so, clear the way for one of their more radical far-left candidates. Or, who knows, even Hillary Clinton. Rita, I have found these hearings, I know you've been watching them all week, I have found what has been going on this week unbelievable, and I've found the way the media, much of the media has been covering this as if somehow this has just not been a complete dumpster fire for the Democrats, unreal.
And it's not just the ABC, SBS and the left-wing papers, it is the commercial TV stations, the free-to-air stations that the majority of Australians watch at night, where they are given this absolute nonsensical CNN, or partisan, I should say, CNN, Huffington Post, MSNBC narrative, no balance, no pertinent facts like some of the clips you just showed us, none of that, just disaster, disaster, disaster. And no mention that when Obama came to power, he fired the Bush-appointed diplomats, the ambassadors.
Because Rita...
And now this woman who was sacked, apparently we've got to care about her feelings, that she was upset that Trump sacked her, when nobody made a fuss when Obama came in and just cleared them out.
And they shouldn't have made a fuss because the president controls foreign policy. Ambassadors serve at a president's pleasure. That is perfectly appropriate. And all of these people, it's so interesting to see all the headlines that have come out about this, where everyone says, Trump subverted American foreign policy. No, Trump is the president makes foreign policy. What he subverted was a bunch of deep state bureaucrats who wanted their foreign policy.
Now, let's fast forward a little bit, because they are determined to impeach him. They don't care what for, and they're going to. So they're going to impeach him. Senate's going to chuck it out in what?
And that's it.
10, 12 minutes straight. And what is the net effect? I mean, sure, they'll appease a few of the crazies within the party who've been screaming for impeachment from day one for 3 solid years. But isn't it just going to strengthen Trump's support? Isn't it going to lead him to raising a lot more money?
Rita, they won't throw it out in 10 or 12 seconds in the Senate. What they'll do is they'll say, okay, let's take this on. Let's subpoena Hunter Biden. Let's subpoena Joe Biden. Let's subpoena former ambassadors. Let's find out what really happened here.
Yeah. Well, speaking of foreign policy, United States and elsewhere, Boaz Gaynor is the founder and the executive director of the International Policy Institute for Counterterrorism and is a member of Israel's National Committee for Homeland Security Technologies, the International Advisory Board of Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies in Singapore, and the International Advisory Team of the Manhattan Institute to the New York Police Department. And when he gets a spare moment or two, Boaz Gaynor lectures on terrorism and counterterrorism at the High Command academic courses of the Israeli Defense Forces. Professor Gaynor is in Australia thanks to the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, AJAC, and of course you can subscribe to AJAC just simply by going to ajac.org.au.